shortly introduce myself. So, yeah, I'm a pastor, not for that many years actually yet, now for like 3 years. And I'm a pastor in Belgium, in the city of Antwerp. I have a Flemish-speaking church there. But originally, I am from the Netherlands, and so I'm married to Marcelo, my Brazilian husband, and we have a son. And yeah, ministry is great. Thank to the Lord that we can work for the church, that we can have experiences. But at the same time, we come across difficult topics. And I would like to discuss one of them today, which is church trauma, as has been said. And the question of why have so many left the church, because it's often connected, the two of them. And I think it's, yeah, in the time that I've been in ministry, but I've also been part of the church my whole life. I've seen so many cases, like Lauren said before as well. You see so many people that have struggled through some type of trauma, and some of them leave even scars for the rest of their lives. So I think it's important to talk about and to not act as if it doesn't exist or that it's only their fault or this sort of stuff. So yeah, this is why I chose this topic. Maybe good to start with what actually church trauma is, and probably you have heard the term church hurt a little bit more because that's the most usual term to use in this sense, but I will come to that. I'm using the term church trauma over here, and it's because, yeah, the sound is a little bit different, but they're actually, yeah, they have more or less the same meaning. But the definition of church trauma is basically any emotional, spiritual, relational, or even physical pain, because, you know, emotional pain can have its impact on, yeah, you can experience through that even physical pain, I must say, that people experience in a Christian church context, and it's caused by the church, by its leaders, or by members and their actions, or sometimes even their inactions, or by certain teachings or the structure of the church. So that's the broad and general definition of the term. And it's important to understand that church trauma exists on a scale. It's not just that all trauma or hurt is the same, of course. There are situations in churches where some things are not going too well, but other things are going fine. And so the hurt is sometimes a little bit less intense than in situations where something very bad happens or a whole church context has just gone bad and it causes a large part of people even some pain. So yeah, it's a spectrum, let's say. Sometimes it can be something that you can overcome, and sometimes it's a wound that just stays there for a long time. And this is why I also use the term church trauma, because the term church hurt is the most used one, but sometimes people see it as if it diminishes a little bit the pain, or that it sounds like, oh, it's actually not too bad. Meanwhile, when you talk about church hurt or church trauma, it can be something quite severe, and it can be very serious, and it has sometimes very serious consequences. So it's good to keep that in mind. This is why I use the term church trauma. And it's important to say as well, I'm talking from a position where I haven't experienced any trauma, luckily myself, which is great. Of course, there are some things in the church that are sometimes difficult. That's normal. But that being said, it just makes my perspective a little bit different. I think if you talk to someone with who has experienced a real church trauma, they can probably give even some more insights on how they healed, or maybe they're still working through the process and so on. I look at this issue more from the perspective of, yeah, how can we understand it as church, and what can we do? From like conversations that I had with people that went through church hurt, through church trauma, and so on. Yeah, maybe good to say as well, why is church hurt sometimes, or church trauma, so traumatizing? Because of course we experience trauma in many areas of life. Sometimes we can have that at our job, or with some friends, or maybe we can experience yeah, with at a hobby club or something, and someone says something very bad, and it has a big impact on you. But when we talk about the church, usually I think it has a very big impact on some individuals. And I think it has to do with the idea as well that we see, and we always talk about church as a family. We say brother and sister, and lately, some weeks ago, I have been introduced as Auntie Thirza is going to preach, and having a children's story, which is great. But with that, you also have the expectation of like all these family members are gonna live according to the example of Christ. They want to do the best and live according to the principles in the Bible. But then we see in reality that church is not perfect, and that we all make mistakes, right? So sometimes we have high expectations, especially with regard to the church, and we cannot really fulfill that. And another thing is, of course, like anything religious, anything spiritual that, yeah, touches our core identity as well. It's part of who we are. Yeah, of course, a trauma at the job can be very traumatizing too, but this is something to take into account when we talk about the church context. Now, I would like to show you some data that I have been looking up with regard to specifically this theme, church trauma. And the interesting thing is, how does this work actually? Can people ask questions during the presentation, or is that afterwards?
Usually we just let you finish up the presentation, and but some people will raise their hands a little early.
Okay.
Say something just to remind themselves that they're uh, they want to ask you something when the time comes. But
Oh,
no,
okay.
we want you to go ahead and do your presentation, and then we'll open it for discussion.
Oh, that's great. Um, So the thing is, there are some studies, there's some research in this area, but it's not so much. It's quite little actually, and that given the fact that the subject is quite serious and that it occurs quite a lot in the church. There is not too much data. I've looked at some data in the US, so a context where many of you will come from, and then also the European context, since I am pastor here and I've been born and raised here in Europe. And what I've noticed is that the US is actually stronger in the area of having quantitative data. You probably know this because you have research institutes, Christian ones like the Barna Group study. And yeah, in Europe, what I've noticed is that it's often qualitative research, and that they do a lot of research, yeah, in the area of what's the connection between religion and mental health. So what kind of impact has religion on mental health? And then they look at positive sides and sometimes negative sides. So it touches also in an indirect way on the theme of church trauma, because it also mentions some of the reasons or struggles that people feel with religion or with faith. But the US, yeah, has a little bit some clearer numbers. But I must say that some studies are quite old. So this one, for example, from the Barna group, is a study from 2010, and it says of all unchurched adults, which is 28% of the US population in 2010, nearly 4 out of 10 said they avoid churches because of some bad experience they had with church people. So that is 37%. That's quite a lot, and these are the people that really do not visit anymore. Now, there is also some more recent study, which is 2023, by Slade and al. They say that around 30% of all US adults, so then they don't even look just at like, are they still religious or not? It's just of all US adults, they have experienced some religious trauma in their life. And they say that 15 to 20% experience it still today. So that's quite a significant number if you look at it. Of course, I would say the US context is a little bit more religious than the European one. So it might look different in Europe, but I think on a church scale, you will probably see more or less the same figures. I see, at least I come across this kind of cases of church hurt, people that avoid the church because of things they experienced in the past. You see that quite a lot. There's also some other study, quite interesting, from 2021 that is also US context. They show the feelings that people had after certain church services, and then they make a distinction between practicing Christians and church adults. And the practicing Christians, these are the ones that have visited the church at least once in the past month. So yeah, like usually people that go to church every month. And the church adults, those are the ones that just visit once every 6 months or so. And they show like the ones, a couple of things, like the ones that felt happy after the services and so on. And they also asked if whether they felt guilty or disappointed. Now, it doesn't immediately say like that they had a trauma from it, but at least it shows that, yeah, people can feel guilt after something they've heard in the church or experienced, or disappointed, and that might result in church hurt. And the set of the ones that visited more often, you can see that it's around 30% of them that had at least more than half of the time, or sometimes 8% even every time that they felt guilty after church service. So it's quite a lot. For the church adults that visited less, the percentage is even higher. So you come at like 40% of people that half of the time or even more often felt guilty after attending a church service, which is quite like shocking, quite a big amount. But of course, there's also the positive side that people never experience it, or only sometimes. And then the ones that felt disappointed, the figures seem to be lower. So guilt is probably a little bit more of a theme than feeling disappointed. But you see also that, for example, 7% of the ones that visit every month say they felt disappointed every time. And some even say sometimes. Of the church adults, the figures are a little bit higher. Again, probably, because might be because they are already more critical, they visit less, or if you visit more often, you may see more nuance in the church services, and that not every speaker or every person does the same thing. So that might explain some of the differences. And then some last study that was interesting as well, also from the US. So thank you for all the data that you gather. It's from Liveway Research. And this is actually more, it's also a little bit older, but a study from 2017. And they look more at like 23 to 30-year-old people, so young adults that left their church when they were around 18 or to 22 years old, which is usually the age that you just don't follow as your parents anymore. That's the age when you are going to college and study somewhere else. So you try to find your own life path. That's basically the thing. And they ask them like, why did you stop attend church? And the great majority actually says that it's just because they attended the college and they had to move to some other part of the country, and maybe then they don't visit as often anymore. But a quite large percentage as well, 32%, they actually said that it was because church members seemed judgmental and hypocritical. So, and then again, a quite large percentage, 29%, says that they didn't feel connected to the people in their church. No, that doesn't mean that that's per se trauma. You can just feel like, yeah, okay, you don't have that much connection, people are different, etc. But I would say that you feel judged or that people are hypocritical. That's, yeah, is often one of the sources for church hurt, actually, for church trauma. So it's just good to show. Oh, and then I come actually at one of the most important aspects of this presentation, the more important aspects, but what are exactly the reasons behind trauma and church dropout? And there appears quite some things in the research that people bring up, but the thing is they don't quantify that really. They don't tell us like what is more common, which type of hurt or which type of trauma is more common in a church or not. We just know that in some areas there's more research because it's, for example, more urgent to do research there. Or it just happens to be something that came to the forefront, and so they showed up. But in the studies you see in general some areas of church hurt that are more frequently mentioned, let's say it like this. And I would like to put it in a few categories, so it's important to know these categories, I think. And one of the first ones is actually spiritual abuse. And spiritual abuse happens basically when someone uses religion, faith, or even the Bible, for example, scripture, anything to control and manipulate or shame or harm others. And there are many different examples that can fall under spiritual abuse, but you have, for example, controlling behavior. And then I've just mentioned like a couple of like sayings that could reflect this kind of controlling spiritual abuse. For example, someone who says, if you leave this church, you are leaving God. Then that's a way to control a person. For example, I hope you don't hear this too often, but it does appear. Or a saying like, the Holy Spirit is telling me that you should obey me, or that you should take the following decision. The Holy Spirit is saying this and that. It can seem like very spiritual, but at the same time, it is often used to control people or to do something that you actually want. Another thing is using shame and guilt. And I have also some examples of that. For example, someone who can say to you, you are dealing with this problem or this depression or an illness or anything, a death in the family, for example. And when that person says, well, that's because of a lack of faith or it's a punishment from God, then yeah, that's a way to put shame or guilt on you. Or, and this might be also a bit of an Adventist thing because we know it all very well, right? Someone who says, you still ask that question, that's because you need to grow in your faith. Yeah, there's this faith ladder, and some people are lower on that ladder, and some are higher. Well, that's also a way to make someone feel guilty. And of course, like when it happens once, you might think, oh, that person is like saying this is a bit annoying, is sad. But if that's something systemic, which happens, but even if it's said once, but if it's systemic, it can really turn into abuse. Another thing is this idea of spiritual protection, for example. And what you do is basically isolating persons. Some examples as well is, for example, when someone says to you, it's better you don't have friends outside the church because these are not good people. They're all the same. Everything outside is demonic and corrupt. It's perhaps a bit exaggerated, but it's an example of what people can say. Like, we need to be different outside. The world is corrupt and is dangerous, and etc. Then also under spiritual abuse, still there is the example of financial manipulation. Also happens sometimes. For example, God will only bless you if you tithe or give your offerings. Or also anyone who just tries to pressure you to give beyond means. This happens in some contexts where you see that people don't have that much money, but the church is very beautiful and well built. Yeah, it's sometimes because they ask people to give more because the church is everything and God is everything. Spiritual gaslighting, another thing is an example saying is you are being attacked by Satan for questioning. You cannot question anything. That's an attack from Satan. Well, and then we have another reason or a source, I would say, for possible church trauma, and that's abuse of authority. And that's when leadership is abusing their position, their power, and it turns very bad, the leadership. Some examples: sexual abuse by leaders. It's a very known one. Actually, this one is researched more often, and mostly, they report the amount of cases or what people go through. So there's quite some studies around that. Mostly around the Catholic Church, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in the Protestant churches or in the Adventist Church. It does also. It clearly does, and I know even examples of it. It hasn't been quantified within the Adventist Church, but it's a thing. Another abuse of authority is, for example, silencing any criticism. You can say critics are spiritually rebellious. Well, that's also a form of spiritual abuse at the same time. Of when you say, well, we remove people from ministry roles who report misconduct, who say they don't agree with something. Threatening with legal action is another example. Another abuse of authority is also financial exploitation. So using, for example, church funds for your personal use. Or when you say, well, I'm not going to pay you anything, or I'm not gonna give you any travel costs if you disagree with me, or if you don't pay tithes, or if you don't do this and that. It's a very bad example of control. And then I have to go back. Still. Oh, yeah. I'm sometimes a little bit with the screen. I think. to manage things. And another example is, yeah, something you see quite a bit worldwide right now that is popular, authoritarian leadership or narcissistic leadership, I would even say. It's the idea that you should have unquestioned loyalty to some leader. And also when a church, for example, sets up its structure in such a way that one man has unchecked control, all of this is, yeah, an example of authoritarian leadership. And other ones, still examples of abuse of authority, are misusing church discipline, anything related to, for example, putting a person in front of the church and say, well, you have to confess your sins. Still happens sometimes. Nepotism and favoritism, hiring unqualified church family members for paid roles, or having, special relations with an inner circle that have special access to things, privileges, all these kind of things. Then an important one as well, theological control. The idea that there's only one way to read the Bible, one truth, and if some people in the church don't agree with that and they have ministry roles, you can remove them from that just because they have some different ideas. And this last one is perhaps a bit surprising because, aren't we supposed to counsel people within the church? But I would even say that you can abuse authority when you counsel beyond competence. So, yeah, there have been cases in the church where, for example, you handle domestic violence, very difficult cases all by yourself, without reporting it to the police, without safety planning. Um, Also, things like someone is in a very abusive marriage, and you say, "Well, stay married because that's God's plan." It's very dangerous actually, because this person may even lose their life. You don't know because of this type of abuse. So sometimes we have done this not very consciously, giving advice, and we think, oh, we need to counsel, um, give counseling, but we need to actually be aware that that's not what we are trained for. Yeah, maybe some people in the church are, maybe there are therapists, and that's great. But when you are not, it's better to leave that to someone with the competence, actually. And then some other well-known reasons for trauma and church dropout are anything related to interpersonal context and their conflict. And there are many things related to that, like, for example, the feeling of feeling judged, uh, partly also because of maybe legalism or people setting rules for others. This is the way to believe, etc., etc. You can get conflicts around those themes with people in church. Gossip, so theological disagreements, anything related to generational conflicts, maybe some, I would not say in general, but some older generations might be more like, oh, we need to go on the same path, and the youth wants to change something or do things differently, and they are not given space, so they feel unheard, and they're like, well, it's better to leave because nothing changes here. Also, more and more within the Adventist context, you find, at least in Europe, and I can imagine everywhere, is cultural and ethnic differences. And yeah, out of that, many types of conflicts can arise as well. Conflicts over how do you, for example, worship style disputes, just having different ways to praise the Lord, etc. Personality clashes is also just a very, very normal thing. And for example, also like, yeah, clashes around leadership roles or roles in general, competition, all these kind of things can occur. Also, a very important thing to say is that not all trauma is only caused by the church, and not all abuse is only caused by the church, because it can also be that individuals experience some trauma or some hurt by the church because of the way they were brought up. So their own family experience, their upbringing, if it was an unsafe environment, or you got a view of a very punishing God, or like just one-sided view on certain thing that may impact your view on God and church in general. In some very severe cases, if you experience some abuse at home, these individuals are often also more prone to experience abuse in other contexts. So you become, it becomes like a vicious circle almost. So you become also more, you encounter more trauma even because of that. And then, of course, an important one to mention as well is that there are some groups, specific groups in church that might also be more prone to experience some type of trauma and hurt. And then we talk about LGBTQ plus. Of course, we had some old practices that were clearly not great, like pray the gay away and all these kind of things, like the old ideas of like, oh, we can change these individuals, but also like removing memberships, removing people from roles that can all cause trauma and feeling like you are left out. But the same can count for neurodivergent individuals. Then we talk about individuals with special in which the brain works different, let's say, such as autism, ADHD. People with disabilities very often also feel more left out, or that people don't take certain things into account that are important for them. And I would even say that leaders, and I've not mentioned it here actually, but some people that have been a leader in the church, and especially also for a long time, that they are also more prone to experience some hurt. You see, even in there, I haven't put it here, but there's some statistics even that show that those middle-aged leaders actually sometimes are more often to just leave the church behind because they have been traumatized by something that happened, or disappointed. They felt like everything was left to them and nobody was helping them or like supporting them in some way. I would say these are some of the main reasons that are over again mentioned. And then there's something that I've noticed also in my own, not so much only my own church, but the churches I've seen around, is that sometimes one generation of people can experience some type of a trauma. Like, for example, some older generations were grown up with this idea of like, oh, God is watching you in every corner, and you have to watch out because sin is very bad, and God is a punishing God, and someday there will be a judgment, and so on. And they may have been so scared by this image, and it may have formed their image of God, that they completely want to go into another direction, this generation, and doesn't want to know anything of these old images of God. They want to focus, for example, just an example, more on God is love and God is good and those sides. But the thing is that maybe unintentionally, those generations that have rebelled against the previous ones can become controlling again in some way for the generations that come after them, because they may say like, well, this is the image of God, and everything that was said in the previous generations is not good, and this is how you should experience faith. To have a practical example, because I've seen that myself in some different type of churches. For example, some older generations, and I think this played its part since the 70s, 80s, I don't know. They had specific problems with prayer because they were growing up with the idea that prayer was used to heal people, and if you prayed hard enough and often enough, then God would heal this and that person from depression, from sickness, from anything. And if you didn't pray hard enough, then that's an example of not having enough faith. And yeah, or that they perhaps lost a family member or something, and other people in church said, well, that was God's plan, that's how it was supposed to be. And so they, yeah, got very traumatized by this image of prayer, and then they say, well, prayer in general, it's not to, you shouldn't pray for other people, and it's because it's not honest if God is giving something to one person and not to the other one. Prayers more for yourself, for your own growth, and so on, which is which is fine to have that image of prayer. But now you see, for example, that younger generations are again more interested in prayer, and they want to experience prayer. And what's prayer? And yeah, if they receive a certain image of prayer, like, oh, but watch out for this type of prayer, you cannot pray for this or that person when it's sick, because that's not what we should pray for, then you feel like yeah, those generations can be a bit controlling for the ones that come after them. So it's just yeah, you can see how unintentionally we maybe cause hurt in yeah, several generations because of what we experienced before. Just very short, maybe just to mention what an impact church trauma can have, because we don't always realize that, because we are not always trained to see that someone is depressed, or that someone goes through trauma, through hurt. And I think it's important to realize this, what people can go through. And they did some studies about this, even one in the Netherlands. So that was one of those qualitative studies. They looked at what did it actually do to some people when they left a community. And yeah, some of the impacts are quite shocking. So for example, the continuing feelings of shame and guilt. If something is so ingrained, you become programmed like that, and it's very difficult to think differently. So you can always be like, oh, but maybe God is going to punish me if I do this or that, or it's not good, and you feel shameful, etc. You can also have like ongoing anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, of course. Something you hear more often nowadays is also post-traumatic stress disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The difference between the two is that the symptoms may be the same, like a person can show lots of anxiety, stress, or depression. But in PTSD, it's because of one thing that happened in the past. So one very traumatic experience, for example, sexual abuse or something. You can have PTSD because of this, sometimes even for the rest of your life. In the case of complex PTSD, it has been something systemic. It has been something that has been going on for a longer time in the past. And what you see is that yeah, really impacts on individuals. And if you understand these impacts of trauma, it can also help us understand more, yeah, why some people go through what they go. One important one is also the spiritual and the existential crisis. So you can really, when you leave a church, you can even leave your faith and religion and God behind. And I would say that's especially also the case for yeah, where when people felt very deceived by their church communities. Like for example, they were told for a long time, like this is the truth and this is how you should believe, and this is what God is like, and this is how it's all set up. And you believe that very much, but then you come across some lies, or you see like, oh, but wait a minute, everything that I believed in might all be a lie, or maybe we were just abused by this. You often see this with sects as well, or cults, where they have these very specific views, but it can be any church, as long as you, yeah, it's quite a controlling community, and they tell you what to believe and it's the truth, and you may think when you're in it like, oh, this is very great because it gives purpose in life, it gives direction. But when you see that it's hypocritical, or that you have been lied to, you might also be more prone to just leave religion all behind and say, oh, then I don't want to know anything of God anymore, because you project that image of the church on God. So that's quite a serious thing. Another thing is, of course, loneliness and loss of community. People that leave the church, you would be like, oh, then they're happy that they left the church, and they don't have to deal anything anymore with religion. But it's actually, many of them showed in studies, is that they feel loneliness, because their community also meant something to them, and especially in some faith religions where, for example, you can have this in the Adventist church as well. When everyone around you was Adventist, or you went to an Adventist school and all your friends were Adventist, yeah, and then you leave, you may keep them as friends, but you may also have difficulties. So yes, the loneliness. And this is also the thing, you may not trust a spiritual authority as well. So you just may have difficulties to trust. And something that I have recently seen as well, and I've heard more anecdotal stories as well in Europe, in several churches, is that yes, there is increasing interest in religion again, amongst also younger people. But what's happening is that, and yeah, that sounds maybe a bit bad. It's not meant this way, but I see it especially a bit more with younger men, that they really become interested in religion in some community. But some of them also, yeah, they do a lot of church hopping. So they go to one church, but as soon as, yeah, some complications come, or some difficult situation, or they don't really agree with something, they go to the next one. So we have seen in the past year in my church, for example, 7 of them, they come, but they don't stay for a very long time. And sometimes when you talk to them, they seem to have a general difficulty with trusting. Something went on in the past, I don't know, that had to do with, like, someone broke their trust, and now they don't want to really bind too deep in a community, because they may come across some problems, and they do some church hopping. So it might be an impact even of trauma that's caused not just by family or anything else, but by church as well. So I want to apply this also to the Adventist church. Let's talk a bit specifically about the Adventist church, and then take the Bible with it as well. Because yes, I think our church is a great church. I'm happy to be an Adventist, and I'm also proud of our church. And I think there's a lot of diversity in our church. Many churches do great in this area. There is no trauma. People are happy to be part of their community, etc. But there's also always room for improvement. And I think it's important to be aware of one theory in psychology that, yeah, may be related to church trauma, and that may be related to some challenges that the Adventist Church may face. And that's the psychological theory of group think. And it's established actually also by an American social psychologist. It was Irving Yanis. He came with that in 1972. And he basically says the following. There are some aspects of groups that do this type of group thinking. And he says groups who do group thinking, they really want to maintain unity. So unity is very, very important for them, and sometimes at all costs. So that's the highest thing on the list. We need to keep unity. So they're highly cohesive, actually. Can be a good thing too, of course, as well. And so, consequently, the group members strongly desire a consensus. People need to think the same. We all go into the same direction. And that comes often, not always, but often with the desire for a stronger leader, one that tells the direction, and then you also are more likely to go all in the same direction. But the downside of this is that opposing opinions are often discouraged or suppressed. So there is a type of social pressure to go in that same direction, and some even hold they stay silent and don't give their opinion because you want to have the unity, or you want to maintain the unity. Often it goes also with an illusion of correctness, of even perfection, I would say, and you isolate yourself from outside opinion. So then you start to think like we can't make mistake. We do it all great because look, we all think the same and nobody criticizes. And this happens often with groups that are under a certain time pressure. And because of that, they may take risky decisions. This is basically what he says. Now, and my question is like, can Adventist church be in danger of groupthink? And I think any church can be in danger of groupthink, but it's important to see some aspects in Adventism that make us prone to fall into this pitfall sometimes. And so for one thing, for example, that's important to keep in mind is that we are a world church. And let me tell you this, I love the fact that the Adventist church is a world church because that's the way I found my husband from Brazil. Otherwise, I would not have met him at one of those youth camps. The world church also facilitates all those hospitals, the schools, it's all the great facilities that we have, the contacts that we have worldwide. And anywhere I go, it feels like a family when I step in an Adventist church. So it's a great thing. But the thing is also that as Adventist church, we have always had this strong focus on unity. So in that sense, I see some something connected to this group thinking, that we really like to have the unity, and also a little bit of a top-down structure. And this unity, I think it reflects itself, the wish to have that unity in a theological, doctrinal, and a structural unity, which is great, but it's also combined with the fact that as a church, we focus very much on the end times. I would not say that counts for all the churches. There is a lot of diversities. I have seen some churches that focus a lot on it still. Some others, they don't. They are more like, living in the present and so on. But historically, we have been a church that focuses a lot on the end times and on Jesus' return. And that comes, of course, with the perception of we are under a certain time pressure and we need to distribute, or we need to spread the gospel. we have an important task. We have been historically also a church that is very instrumental, more focused on what do we do instead of who we actually are. Yeah, also who we are, but the doing is very important. But with that, also the importance of unity becomes even higher, and the idea of like we need to be on the same path when it comes to theology, when it comes to doctrines, the 28 beliefs, etc. And the Sabbath school is also a bit designed for that, so that we keep some unity worldwide. The thing is that can make you prone to some abuse of authority. That's basically the point also with this whole group thinking. If you go too far with that, if you say, well, we need to have 100% perfect unity, which you cannot have in a worldwide church because at some point you are going to experience problems, then yeah, it makes you more prone to that. It's the same for all worldwide churches, basically. Also, we have, of course, the remnant theology, and of course, it became more nuanced with the time. That's all fine, but traditionally, it might have like connected a bit with the idea of like perfection. We need to be perfect in some way, or grow always towards perfection. Also, the idea of like we are different from the world, so we have isolated ourselves a bit. And yeah, that have made us a bit more strange, and that facilitates also a bit the group thinking. Another thing that I think, if you talk very generally, theoretically about the Adventist church, that that may be a pitfall for us, is that support to victims and trauma and abuse is a difficult one. And I would say so because what my experience is that the Adventist church is a great church, but we are a bit of a rational church. Like we inherited this, yes, a bit from Enlightenment, but especially from William Miller and deism, and he called the Bible a feast of reason, and I would say that for many Adventists the Bible still is a feast of reason, and the way we explain Daniel, Revelation, is sometimes very detailed and focused on like explaining everything, but it makes it very rational. And what I have seen is that it's sometimes more difficult for us to focus on emotions, to share emotions. When I ask some question in the Sabbath school, how do you feel about this or that? Then you mostly get an explanation of what a theology is or what the doctrine is. We're just not so tuned into that. And what I see as well is that very often, not in all churches, because there are many churches that do differently. Yeah, we don't talk a lot about difficult things like depression, like suicide, even like traumas, PTSD. It's just all not discussed very much because it's difficult, and we are not so used to it because theology and theory are very important to us. Yes, but I've seen differences. But it's just to say some observations that we might deal with. Then, as one of the last things, I don't know actually how much time I still have, but some guidance from the scripture, just to say that this topic of trauma, of abuse, of hurt, is also something that you can find in scripture, and you can also find some guidance from there. We cannot go into all details here, but one of the most important thing is that there is a consistent focus in the Bible, both the Old and the New Testament, for care for the poor and care for the powerless. mostly orphans and widows, two of the groups that were most neglected in society, the sick. So when it comes to victims of trauma, victims of abuse, the Bible is very clear. Like we need to take care of those who are marginalized, those who just go through a very difficult time. And I think even all the texts together that talk about literally the poor and the powerless, you come across them 20 to 25 times, so orphans and widows. And then you still have all the stories about healings, etc., in the New and Old Testament. But the Bible also talks specifically quite a bit about abuse of authority. So topics related to religious hypocrisy, spiritual control, seeking power, status, etc. The Bible talks about it. We know it comes across, we come it across in the New Testament. Jesus, who criticizes this, who stands up for this issue several times. One of the clear ones is, for example, Matthew 23, verse 4. And then I have to move this box again, for otherwise I cannot read it. It says they tie, so leaders, Jesus is talking about leaders here, they tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. The language is clear, so he condemns that sort of leadership, and what he says that we need to focus on instead is servant leadership. As serving the other is consistently in the New Testament the way to lead and shepherd other people. Very interestingly, you see the same already happening in the Old Testament, and then specifically several prophets, they speak out against bad leadership. You have Jeremiah who does that, you have Hosea who does that, Ezekiel, and the leaders, they speak up against are the priests, actually, the prophets, and the kings, I believe, and I probably forget one other one as well. But I just want to read because it's very beautiful. I just finished a series on Ezekiel in my church. We came across this text in Ezekiel 34, and it's very beautiful because here already Ezekiel is standing up against abuse of authority, and it says. And then I have to move this box again. It's the difficulty when I'm the one having this in my screen. Okay, yes. Son of man, so to Ezekiel, he's speaking, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Who to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourself? Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, and healed the sick, and bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, and searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly, brutally. It's beautiful because it's basically the whole New Testament going on there, and Jesus, right? Taking care of the sick, the wounded, bringing back the strayed ones, and search for the lost sheep. It's all from Ezekiel, and yeah, here's being warned against leadership that only takes care of themselves, basically have themselves as the highest priority and not people. Yes.
That's a fantastic passage there, Thirza, to read and to kind of finish your presentation with. I know you can chime in here. We have a few questions. We have an hour left in our our time together. We used to be 2.5 hours. Now we're 2 hours. So
Yeah.
we thank you very much. And we have a couple hands. Can we have a few questions for you or comments? Go ahead. Lauren, you had your hand up first, so join us on in here, please.
Thirza is a pastor, unsurprisingly, I guess. This really hits me on so many levels.
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever heard the the line about the dancing bear. Um, it's not how well the bear dances, it's that it can dance at all. And that makes me think of churches. I've often thought about churches. It's not that how well they hold together, but that they hold together at all. When you
Mm.
think of all the broken people, everybody, and as the pastor, you kind of get that balcony view of your congregation. I mean, I know things about people that I wish I didn't know.
Mm.
Uh, I know what's going on in their worlds and what things are like. And so you have
Mm.
this big balcony view, and you know that all these people are just so damaged, and you know that there's this family here that has constant conflict at home, and a child that's probably being not treated very well. You know that some of your church members have emotional problems, all of that. And it makes me think sometimes, how possibly can the church hold together? How can it work in any way? And
Mm.
if and when you start talking about guilt and all that, one of the lines that crossed my mind is, how many of my church members would have been there if they didn't have some degree of guilt about it? If they didn't have some degree of, oh, I guess I need to be there for the rest of the people, or I need to be there. Maybe God wouldn't like it if I'm not there. I'll give to the church because the church needs it. I don't really want to, but I will. You know,
Mm.
there's this whole mix of not always very good motives that people have for doing what they for being there and for doing what they do, right? You
Mm.
know, so and then let me add this. Adventists have it even harder. When I remember being in small towns where people would say, "Well, there's 6 Sunday churches here." I didn't like the Presbyterians, and the Methodists were close enough, so I went over to them.
Mm.
Seventh Adventist can't do that. There's one Sabbath keeping church in town, and even if it has 30 very not very nice people, you don't have
Yeah.
anywhere to go.
Yeah, you have to deal with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's your thing. It's what you got to do. So I don't the as I thought of this, I just kept thinking, I don't know how happy churches actually. I remember Monty Saline, who was a sociologist who did a lot of studies. I remember he told me one time that 68% of churches reported that they've had a significant conflict within the church. Now,
Mm.
I'm just pulling that out of the air because it's been 10 years since he told me that, but that was shocking to me.
Yeah.
How do churches even manage to survive with all of this going on? It's and yet we've got to believe that the church has something special. It's supposed to be a thing, um, right?
Yeah.
The church is biblical, but then you look at Paul letters to the churches, right? All of them were instructive. All of them were scolding, saying, "You guys straighten out. You're doing this wrong and you're doing that wrong. I see, ever since I went away, you have gone downhill on this and that and the other thing." And then the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation. I mean, I think there's one that doesn't have some major uh, some major scolding, some major, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong, out of those seven churches. I don't know. There's just thoughts off the top of my head, but when I look back
Could
at my
survive.
ministry, when I look back at my ministry, I don't know how I accomplished anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sometimes, yeah, God still works through the imperfections. That's the
Hmm.
only thing I can think of because it's sometimes indeed miraculous how we, yeah, still continue and find a way out again
Yeah,
out of some of the damage and the conflicts and the troubles. And the same in the New Testament already. Indeed, if you see Paul, the most talked subject he talks about is actually unity, right? Because there were so many conflicts, like of course Church of Corinthians, one of the known ones, but the other ones as well. So it's has been something of all times.
yes, it goes way, way back.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes, in a sense, it makes the pastor's job kind of impossible. And that's how
It
I
is,
felt
yeah.
about it. I just felt like, I don't know what to do with these people sometimes.
Yeah, and the load, like several things at the same time, indeed, and you're expected to be able to manage all everything that comes your way, and sometimes not
Yeah, yeah.
possible. So it's yeah,
People walk into you. You've had this happen. Somebody walks into your office and says, "I don't know who else to turn to, so I'm bringing this to you." And they lay out a problem to you that you just think, "I don't know what to do either about that.
yeah,
I have no idea how to solve this problem in your life."
yeah, yeah,
All I can do
right.
is listen and pray, and I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, folks, being a pastor, if you're at all sensitive, is super hard. It's almost an impossible job.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
it is.
Thirza.
Well, Lauren, I'll chime in here and agree with you as a former pastor. Don't get me started on my stories, or nobody else would talk. So
I
we will
understand.
bring Eduardo in here. Eduardo, I'm going to ask you to unmute with this little button here, and let you join the conversation as we discuss this matter today. Please.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read Jeremiah 1:10. It said, "See, I have this day set you over nations, over kingdoms, to root out, to pull down, to destroy, to throw down, to build, and to plant." And
Mm.
Luke 2:34 said of Jesus, "This child is set up for the fall and rising of many. If you see the sun, what does to the clay, it harden it, but to the wax, it softens it." So I think that traumatizing has two reactions in human beings. And I can see that God is in the business of traumatizing all the time. You can see it from Genesis, Joseph, Daniel, Paul. I mean, the Bible is full of history of people being traumatized in the church.
Mm.
But I think that is for the purpose of bringing them to Him, showing them you are guilty, you are wrong, you are a sinner, you need me. You need a Savior, you need a God for your problems, for your trauma.
Mm.
But in some people, they reject God. They said, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this kind of God." So what do you
Mm.
think?
That some people say I don't want to deal with this kind of God, and you mean what to do with people that reject God, even though He's the one who can bring healing? You mean?
That trauma either hardens people or can make them more repentant and softer. I think it's a good insight.
Mm. Yeah, it trauma can it works in each individual different. So indeed, it can bring you even further away from God, that you don't want to know anything from him anymore because you feel deceived, or you project some struggles you have with the church on God. But the other way can be as well. As some people, they feel very lonely and they feel actually fulfillment in God because they feel like they are not left behind by God as the only one. So it can indeed go both ways. It's an interesting insight.
And sometimes I think, we think God causes our trauma, but sometimes we cause our own trauma and blame God for it.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things where all things work together for good to them that love God. I'm glad that some things have happened to me now. At the time that they happened, I was not glad for them. So there's a opportunity of having some perspective on those things.
Oh, we don't hear you anymore.
I think you're calling on Emmanuel, but
I hit the button.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I enjoy your presentation, and I have two questions for you. Number one, after doing this research, what are the two more important sources of trauma in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? And number two, how can we be proactive to avoid traumatic experience to proliferate in the Adventist Church if this is the case?
Mm. Uh, yeah, so the source of trauma, I would say so. I've just very theoretically shown two in the presentation, which is like possibly we might be prone to abuse of authority because of the danger of group thinking. We might be prone to neglect towards victims, but on a more practical level, I think it depends very much for each church. So the differences are huge between churches. Some churches, they might have a culture where spiritual abuse is more. So when you really talk about the local level, the spiritual abuse more present. Some churches might be more prone to leave out certain groups like LGBTQ plus, or like disabled people may not be sensitive to that. Some other church may be more prone to, I don't know, yeah, the abuse of or interpersonal conflicts because there just no, yeah, certain characters don't go together. So I think it's very important to analyze it actually for each church, and to see what you can do as a church. And then the second question was like what we could do about it, right? To prevent it.
Yes.
Yes. I think it's some things are already important to do, and that's to discuss this topic actually more with the church, and to say, hey guys, it actually exists, church trauma, and quite some people, they stay away from it. Abuse is a thing that goes on in the church, and it has been discussed in some churches and conferences already. But I think it's important to discuss this topic so that people are actually more aware. And I think I've actually it's one of the last slides, or no, this actually not. The other thing is rather just creating an atmosphere, I think, in the church where we are more open to discuss emotions, open to discuss certain problems. Because right now we just don't discuss things like depression, for example. In some churches they do, but not all of them. Or things like even suicide, very extreme, but it occurs in the church. Things like some intense trauma, like individuals, they don't really bring that up. And when they don't feel safe to bring it up, it's actually not a good thing. So if you can create a church that feels like a safe place where people are allowed to discuss their problems, where people feel heard, they can come to others. I think it works also in a preventative way, because if you cannot discuss certain things, things like, for example, abuse can go on for much longer time without anyone knowing it. Meanwhile, if a church feels like a safe place and you can talk about those things, it works in a preventive way as well. You cannot prevent everything, because still some type of trauma will occur, because church family is complex, and we always want more people in the church, but the more people you want, the more you also find complex stories and complex trauma and things. So you cannot prevent everything, but there are certain things that you can prevent in some way, or at least make it more discussable, make people more aware, which already is, I think, a great first step. Because you can also not say, oh, we do away with all the church structure to avoid some abuse of authority, because you take the good things away as well. So it's not a full, it's not a solution. You just have to work, and from the bottom up with small things, and see how you can actually at least deal better with certain types of trauma. And be a listening ear, like compassionate to the ones that actually experienced trauma, so that they feel heard, they feel loved by the church, even though they left, that you accept that they left, and you say, okay, that's fine that you do that for a while, but we still stay in contact because we care about you. So I think that compassion, and the different texts in the Bible show that, is also a way, to create that safe place for individuals. So I hope
Let's
that
hear from
answers a bit.
Shanique. Thank you.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to see data being used in this forum today, because oftentimes we collect the data, and some may analyze it and some may not appropriately use it. And I'm really very appreciative for this forum today. I heard someone made mention of the church being a place for sick people. And for a long time, that was something for me to think about, and to not just think about, but to research and to kind of strategize. Because while often, we are led or taught by church leaders to leave whatever it is we may be experiencing at the foot of the cross or at the altar, and let God just handle everything. For persons that are, I think the place of worship, the sanctuary itself should be, and you can correct me if I'm exaggerating this thought or this
Oh, we don't
We
hear
kind
you
of
so well. I think the
we kind of
connection.
lost you.
Yeah.
I think we have to move on, Shanique. We can't hear you. Your connection has gone garbled. You might log off and try to join in again, and we'll bring you back in. let's go on to Doreen. Doreen, I'm asking you to unmute. At least I'm trying to. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you so much for speaking on this topic. I have friends and family who have experienced both hurt and trauma in the church, and so that's something that I've thought about quite a bit. But especially in the light of our COVID experience, I'm curious to know if there are any stats reflecting those who no longer attend physical church, but still feel connected to some extent virtually. But those same people get some kind of passive hurt, maybe not quite trauma, from people who use the text of "do not forget the assembling of the saints together," etc., etc. Um, you know, these people experience that kind of hurt or bombarding into their private space because they're comfortable with worshiping or being connected virtually. But it's almost like they're being pestered and badgered into getting back into physical contact. So I was just curious to know, what your reaction is to that.
Yes, I don't know if there are any stats specifically with regard to like people that sort of left the church and watch online now after COVID. I just know that that happens, for example, quite a bit in my church because we are the church with, the biggest live stream in Belgium. Quite a lot of people watch it in the Netherlands as well, and some people they did stay away after COVID and they watch online. Um, I and yeah, some of these people in Belgium in general, because it happens everywhere. We actually still encounter sometimes. They do sometimes come to some church events or some things, but they're just not regularly attending the church anymore.
But is
I
there
don't
pressure from
know.
the church for them to be there more often physically?
I think, yeah, I was thinking about that. Do they feel the pressure? So far, I have spoken to them. I don't feel like they feel pressured, but they do sometimes get the question like, oh, how has it been? I haven't seen you for a while. I think that, and in the church, of course, there's always the group that stands behind the live stream and others not, because yeah, they want more people to participate physically in the church. But I don't think so far, at least I haven't heard of people who really feel hurt by that they feel like the real pressure to need to be there in the church again. But what I do feel and see is that some people, they start immediately apologizing towards me, like, oh yeah, I've not been for a while, or yeah, this or that, because yeah, actually I watch online. But I'm always like, oh, that's fine, that's your choice, it's no problem, it's great that you are here. But so perhaps people do feel somewhere that pressure, or they feel like at least the need to apologize, like, and explain where they were and that they didn't attend, and this and that. So yeah, it might be a thing. I don't have any data, but it is something that people probably do experience. Yes, I think so. So good
Thank you.
observation.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Lauren, why don't you chime in here again, please?
Well, let me just respond to what Doreen said. I have friends who will not go back to church because they hate it when people greet them at the door and say, "Oh, where have you been? We've missed you so much." And it just turns them off. They said, I'd go back, but I just want to slip in and slip out again. And just like, kind of let me get used to this. Or people immediately run up and start hugging and kissing them, and and they just it's just like they don't want to be treated like the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter, and I get that. Uh, uh, let me. I see that Shanika is back. Shanika, I'm going to unmute you. Chris, let's go ahead and get her back in again.
Come on in, Shanique. Sorry we missed as your voice garbled there. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
We can hear you
Yes.
just.
Oh, awesome. Let me try to go as quickly as possible in the essence of time. But what I started to say is that I heard someone mention that the church is for sick people. And for a long time, that sat with me and it pressed upon me and it forced me to sort of research it and try and look some things up because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my whole perception of the way the sanctuary is supposed to be is to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. And I know that we are led and taught by church leaders, particularly pastors and those that are bear or carry the message, um, you know, leads us into leaving whatever burdens or whatever it is that we may be experiencing at the foot of the cross or at the altar and let God deal with it. And I just thought that perhaps, if there is something, an issue that is required of an individual, um, to seek or to get medical care, to not be insensitive about it, but to kind of also put things in perspective. And what brought this up today is not only the usefulness of this presentation, but also earlier in the presentation, one or two of you mentioned that you have experienced personal trauma. And I too have experienced personal trauma that I did not want to necessarily for it to become a burden on the church. Not necessarily that I wanted to exclude myself from the church or not attend church, but not only was the reason or the cause for me not wanting to burden the church with it was so severe, it really required more of my time. And for this purpose or reason, it even required me to have to let someone else serve in the capacity that I was serving in before I had to deal with this issue. And now I am now kind of coming out of the isolation and, trying to get back into the sanctuary. I did promise the church board and other members of the church that I would jump back into a ministry and devote my time to helping to get the missions out. But just to even move a little bit quicker, one or two points as it relates to why people leave the church. Sometimes I have found, and it was very disheartening, and I even gave myself a self-test, being that, some of us, we discriminate, and that is sad because for whatever reason, it could be class, it could be race, it could be socioeconomical culture or positioning. Um, and even going back to when I first attended the forum, I tested myself on discipleship with a colleague, someone in the workplace. Um, she asked me to share my lunch, and I not only gave her one apple, I gave her two. And in the end, it turns out in the end that she was so mean to me, and I just could not understand that behavior. And so, it just took a lot for me to grapple with exercising discipleship and getting God's message out there and being on the mission field and not having that reciprocate. I've also had the opportunity to work with the whereabouts of unknown members, what drives these members out. And sometimes it's a serious case of exclusion. We have the small groups. But then, do we genuinely nurture and care for these members, even though we may have a closer relationship with persons that, let's just say, for example, are in business. We have similar cultures because we can then socially gel together because we have similar lifestyles. And so there are various reasons, and I think that church leaders really need to factor in and consider these issues, as well as also bridging the generational gap. Young people, youthful people, they gravitate more to a culture that speaks their language. And so, for example, taking a United Hillsong concert, it's a gospel band and it's interracial. And I have to use that word because we have now moved into societies globally where we preach and teach diversity. We preach and teach inclusion, and these are just the realities. A United Hillsong concert versus the cathedral sort of concert, so to speak. We ask the young people to engage and participate and volunteer. And then we have the more seasoned veteran members that, you know, tend to maybe push that style away, that may say, listen, we don't want a band. We don't want the noise. We don't want this. We don't want that. And so I think it's just a matter of, listening to everybody's voice and kind of coming to some common ground for everyone to be satisfied in coming into the church and worshiping. And lastly, I want to make this point, and this is so crucial. Technology has taken us over tremendously. And I say this because there are so many strategies from other organizations, whether they're religious or not, that have found a way to offer Adventism for years. Has the advantage we have is standardization. Every single Adventist organization has the same structure, has the same foundation, and no one person can break off and start their own church and do their own thing. So it's standardization. We have a lot of the other organizations coming in with the use of technology to sort of control the way people behave, the way people think, the way people speak. And yes, it's groupthink on a higher level. And while we need to really look at this, because their strategies are pulling away from the health message. Why are we now, with our health message and our diet, why are we now becoming obese? Why are we now shying away or not getting in, our exercise and these kinds of things? Because believe it or not, technology is affecting these areas of our doctrine and of the Gospels.
Shanique, thank you very much. We need to get some more people involved here. We got a few more people in line. So thank you for your comment here today.
Thank you.
Ray, you've been waiting for a little bit. Let's get you in here. Have you joined the conversation?
Well, something that came up a bit ago was the idea from the Old Testament that God brings about certain types of trauma to correct people. And that's based upon the idea from those writers that the gods were in charge of good and bad. I would think that we've gotten beyond that today and would no longer use God as an excuse for what happens in everyday life and for what happens from one human to another, whether it be churches, organizations, or simply circumstances. To have a God that's got to use what we would say very pagan ideas I can't believe in a God like that. That's no that's not a step forward. Is he supposedly this God who could create everything and do everything, but yet he's got to whop somebody over the head to change their life? I don't believe that. Why do we still promote such an idea if we do? Have we not been able to correct people's understanding on that? Thank you.
Yeah, you want to say that some of that also, like the way you read the Bible, of course, like also guides people's behavior. Indeed, they may believe like, oh, God is like this, so I can act like that as well. So yeah, interesting comment indeed. Did Chris say something?
Thales. I don't know
I
where
did,
Chris.
but I was muted at the time. Sorry, I'm still working on getting my buttons in a row here. Thales, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your
Keep
presentation.
it short if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. Among all possible and evident traumas mentioned by you, to me, the doctrinal trauma is being very evident in the past 30 or 40 years with new doctrinal studies and discoveries by many good scholars. In your opinion, how the institution should work with that in order to prevent or mitigate more damage in this area?
How the institution should work with other theologians and yeah, other theologies, basically, right? You mean?
Yeah, with the actual problem that exists, not necessarily with the scholars, but with the problem that it's evident that there is something to be dealt with.
Yeah. Let me ask if I can clarify that, Thales, because I think I was going to ask something similar, bring up something similar. I have friends who feel like doctrinally they were deceived at some
Absolutely.
point along the way. I have one friend who says very bluntly, said they lied to me about Ellen White. And
Yep.
he said it many times. They lied to me about Ellen White. They told me Ellen White got all of her message directly from angels, and all of a sudden they come along and say, no, that's not true. Didn't really happen. They lied to me about if I give the more money I give to the church, the more I'm going to get back when the windows of heaven are thrown open. They lied to me that if I get baptized and join the church, then I'm going to have perfect peace. If I keep the Sabbath, everything's going to work out. And I kind of get that. Atalis, am I homing in on what you're asking here?
You get that right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right on.
Thirza.
Yeah. So and the question is like how we should collaborate then with
How
theologians, or how do you mean?
Okay, how the institution should work with the problem itself, because the problem it's here. We know that for the past 30 or 40 years, many scholars discover so many different things that we didn't know before, and we have to face it now. And we have to make sure the reality needs to be clear in order to not evil people out there bring things in the wrong way. We need to save the church in the proper way. How the institution should work to mitigate this problem, which is being really overlooked.
Yeah, a very good one, because I think, yeah, the church should be less afraid to look again at some of the beliefs they have always held, some of the doctrines, some of the theologies, because nowadays there are so many insight from theologians from all different type of churches from all over, different types of backgrounds, and in if we would seriously look at what they say, we would learn so much that, yeah, we would probably like change some of our beliefs or at least grow further in them.
Yes.
But how the institution can change that, that's a very difficult one. Because then you come back at like some of the difficulties with the structure that we have, the idea of like we need to keep unity at world level. If you say we need to keep unity at world level, you basically always need the idea of like a strong leader, and we need to impose certain beliefs on all sorts of continents and all countries, but it's simply not possible. You won't have, it's not possible to have a world church where everyone thinks the same. It's just I don't believe in it. So I also don't believe we can, for example, say to some parts of leadership, some countries, some continents, like, oh, you should go with the new research, you should look this up and change your beliefs. It just is not possible for some people. For other parts of the world, for other churches, it is. It's actually natural, and many churches already do this on a local level. But yeah, just the higher levels don't know it, or they don't want to see it. But actually, there are so many different beliefs I've already seen, and yeah, you can even speak openly about it in some churches and among pastors. It's not a problem at all. But so yeah, probably on a world level, they should be more open to say we just leave more space for people to think differently and to interpret things differently without imposing this 100% unity and perfection, because you won't reach that. If you want everyone to think the same, it's simply impossible. So
You know,
Well,
there's
yeah.
the Anglicans have this concept they call the broad church. And the
mm,
broad church means that we have a wide road and you can enter and worship with us anywhere on that wide road, left to right and in between. And it seems to me that our Adventist problem is not so much what we believe, but the inflexibility of it.
mm,
Right.
Is
There's
that
that
is that
famous,
Yeah, that's good enough for now. It's a tremendous conundrum.
mm.
it is?
It is, yeah.
Lauren, I think the comment that comes to my mind is that very inflexibility, and the church keeps track of how many people have left, but calls them all apostasies.
Yeah.
Mm,
And there's a lot of people who don't go to church anymore. They haven't apostatized. They may not believe everything, all the 28 exactly the way some people might. They still love the church, but they can't find space for them to be at church. The music is from the 1920s. You know, all the various reasons people may have left, big reasons, big and small, from a core doctrine to the simplest of thing. I don't like the carpet color, and they won't
Yeah.
fix it because they don't have the money.
mm,
Just uh, simply the fact of being so ready to criticize. You know, so
mm,
many churches are just like ready to criticize at a moment's notice. And why can't we just open the gate a little wider? I guess, narrow the gate and few there be that find it. I mean, I've had that thrown up to me many times. We've got to be very strict because the road is so narrow. We all have to walk single file.
But then
Uh,
we have the parable where God says, "Go out to the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in. There's more room in my house. Bring them in." I don't
mm.
know. It's one verse against another, I guess.
yeah.
Linda, your mic should be open now. Please share with us a thought. We have about 10 minutes left.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm not going to pronounce your name because I may get it wrong. Thera.
Here's a
Thirza.
Okay. My support group, a lot of you know I'm in the support group. My support group led me to the God of my understanding. I go to my support group. I'm a Christian. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. My higher power is Jesus, and I say that. But I go to my support group with Buddhists, atheists, whatever. They got all kind of beliefs in a doorknob, and the other people in the groups, and the sun, whatever. But I'm going for a specific reason. And I continue to go, even though I've been sober for a long, long time. I continue to go for a specific reason because the tools are there. I use the tools in my life. Last week we had a young lady to say, um, she she's Asian, and I say that, and she said somebody came up to her and said, we welcome everybody in the meeting. She had went to a person, she wasn't on the Zoom meeting, she went to an in-person meeting, and she was all over, oh, so we welcome, come whatever you want to complain about. And people tried to talk to her, and when it was my turn, I told her, as an African American is Black, if a person came over to me and said, we welcome all kinds in this meeting. Uh, I've learned through going through the meeting a lot, going through them. I wouldn't have said that probably 10 years ago because I was still maybe like a 5-year old. Maybe now I'm maybe 15-year-old, 20-year-old. But the fact that that person came out their comfort zone to say something to me, to say welcome. I don't know the Queen English that well. I'm not an English major. I may have said things to people that made them uncomfortable. Well, I think if they keep coming back, they will understand that I'm here, I'm welcoming. The fact that I don't get every little word right, well, I had to understand the reason why I'm feeling a certain way is because maybe I am a certain way and I don't want to face it. I wasn't ready to face certain things. I would see things in other people and I would think they're coming off on me when really it was me not willing to face certain things. Like Lauren mentioned about the people not wanting to feel like prodigal people. Maybe they are prodigal people. I don't mean to holler. And they don't want to feel like prodigals. But the people are coming out and they're saying, welcome. How many people in church don't even speak to you? I've been to churches where they didn't even speak to me. I mean, the fact that a person speak to you, they don't have to get it. Say, oh, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to speak to a person right.
Are
You
you
know what I'm saying?
are you saying,
The fact that,
Linda, I think what I hear you saying is don't be so sensitive if you want to get along with everybody.
what I'm saying is, the Bible says, confess your faults one to another. We're real in my support group. We're real. And we don't have any people, everybody is broken. For me to ask other broken people to fix me, but I have the tools, the 12 steps. Now, the tools in my Christian life, I use those in my Christian life also. I have the Bible. I listen to a lot of sermons, a lot of sermons. My playlists are full. When I see something in somebody and it hurts me, I got to look at myself and say, why? I got to use the tools and say, why is what that person's saying bothering me? In the meeting the other day, I shared, if a Ku Klux Klan, I mean, an active Ku Klux Klan person that calling me the N word and everything else on the outside came into one of my meetings because he wanted to stop using alcohol, drugs, or whatever. And he asked, I want to stop. Can you help me? Now, if I refuse to help that person, share with that person my experience, strength, and hope, because oh no, I heard you call people the N-word. There's something wrong with me. There's not something wrong with him. He's in the right place. Now, when we get out the meeting, he probably go back to his ranch or whatever, calling me the N-word again. I go to my place. But when I don't in the meeting look at him as a brother that wants that what I have, sobriety, then something is wrong with me. It ain't wrong with him. He can call me N-word all day long. Something wrong with me and not being able to be called the N-word and not love a person. I'm sorry that I'm hollering. This just gets to me. Thank y'all very much for letting me share that.
Thank you,
No,
Linda.
thank you. That's really right. Yeah.
Ed,
We
we've
have to
got a
look at
few moments
ourselves.
left.
Okay. I want to probably stumble around here a bit because I'm trying to work out in my own head something. And I'll just throw it out there. It's about the notion of church, the very concept of church. How many times have we heard somebody say, "Oh, it's too bad. He or she has stopped attending church." And it's used in the context of, I'm really concerned about their spiritual welfare. But the euphemism is, oh, they've stopped coming to church.
Mhm.
But I think there's something beyond that, a euphemism, in that somehow or other we run the risk of associating our spiritual life, maybe even our salvation, with a church. And I'm wondering if that's right. Is that the way we should feel? I mean, we've spent this whole session today talking about people leaving church or staying in church and why. And while the statistics are interesting and mean something, is that really where the action is in between, say, God and humans, where they fall on the spectrum of their relationship to a church? And I don't know if where I'm going with that, except that I don't think church affiliation is really associated with our spiritual nature or our salvation. And that may not hit well with some people because Adventists have a history of thinking we're in a special bracket on that point. So I just throw that out there for our spoken or unspoken consideration that I feel like the church is a place that can help us, perhaps, but it's not where our spirituality lies as people. And I'm stumbling around with that, but those are my thoughts.
Well, I'm with you on that, Ed. As a chaplain, I tell people when I visit them sometimes, I say not all of God's people are in church, meaning at a church service or at a church weekend or at a church Bible study. So let's give Brian Ness the last word, the last hand in our queue. Go ahead, Brian.
The last word, boy, I don't know if I can do that. No, I wanted to inject a little bit of hope, maybe. I mean, well, it's both hope and not so much. My wife tells me all the time about she sees spiritual trauma among students, and we do see that, and I know that a number of them leave for some of those reasons, and often it seems like that trauma comes from the family, which is coming from the church, but I mean, it's because they're trying to get their young people to do what they think they're supposed to do. But aside from that, I just want to say that when I talk to my classes about some of the things where we might not necessarily understand some things the same way today as we did in the past, such as, for example, LGBT issues or age of the earth and those kinds of issues. That students are really hungering for a place where everybody can express their opinions without being judged over those things, because they recognize that not everybody has the same understanding, and so we should allow for space for that. And I'll have to say that our young people are very willing to say, even ones that may not agree that LGBT being gay is okay, they don't want to. They don't want that to be our central belief there. They want to allow people to have room to accept gay people, for example, or to accept other ways of interpreting, the Earth history, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, we have a young people that would, I think, bring the church in a positive direction here, but many of them end up leaving because they're not allowed to do that. The church isn't allowed to be a place where we can actually disagree on things that may not be really related to salvation, but we still make them a big deal in our church. So anyway, hopefully that
Yeah,
brings a
I
little
agree.
hope, but I think we need to make space for that for our young people.
Yes, definitely, to make certain subjects also like open for discussion without
Mhm.
judgment. Indeed,
Mhm. Mhm.
exactly what you say. It's
Mhm.
very